Hey, I'm Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and today's question that every home buyer should ask is, how does the negotiation process work? The negotiation process in a real estate transaction is fairly straightforward, but generally has some back and forths. So if you're a buyer and working with a real estate agent, which is the majority of home buyers, your real estate agent, that could be myself, is in charge of handling this negotiation process. And that's why I think it's really important that you pick a real estate agent that you're confident in. Again, I talked about how do you pick a real estate agent, things to be looking for. But this negotiation process is really important for you, because if this part gets botched, you might be, as a buyer, spending more than you could have and maybe not getting the terms you want. Or if you're a seller, this video is for buyers, but if you're a seller, you might be giving away money that you didn't need to give away. So the negotiation process is really one of the key areas where there's a value for a real estate agent. In this process, there's going to be the initial offer. So as a buyer, you get the opportunity to essentially set the anchor where the negotiation is going to start. And generally speaking, in a normal real estate market, you as the buyer make an offer. If there's nobody else on the table, you could maybe, if the house has been on the market for a short amount of time, so let's say at 2 weeks or less, there's not usually a lot of downward negotiating power that you have as a buyer. We talk about leverage, and there's different kinds of markets. You have buyer's markets and you have seller's markets. A buyer's market is when you have a lot of negotiating power as a buyer. So maybe you do make an offer 10% below the asking price and the seller says, yeah, let's do it, let's sell this house. A seller's market is where the seller has all the leverage and they're the one with the negotiating power. So you might make an offer 10% below the asking price and they don't even respond to you. They might say, yeah, sorry, we're not gonna work with you. We're not gonna negotiate. So as a buyer, you have to judge, first of all, and this is a conversation for your real estate agent, what kind of a market are we in? And in Seattle right now, we're in a seller's market. Now we've seen a little bit of a slowdown. Not tremendously, I would say, but we've seen a little bit of a slowdown and the power has shifted a little bit. We're still in a seller's market, but it's trending a little bit more towards a buyer's market, right? So there's a little bit more negotiating power that buyers have. Still not a ton, but a little bit. And in that situation, you have to know, okay, what kind of a market am I in? And then where do I make that offer? Where do I start? As a buyer, you need to make an offer that is within the seller's, we call it zone of possible agreement. Where might they be willing to accept an offer? So that's why I talk about the amount of time the house has been on the market and what kind of a market it is. So the type of market, if it's depending on that, that's going to dictate your price, and then as well as your terms, and then the amount of time the house has been on the market. If it's been on the market for 60 days, they're probably going to be more flexible with negotiating on the price. Or maybe they haven't been and that's why it's still on the market. This starting point though, when you make your initial offer, it needs to be respectful, right? It needs to be within what would be considered at least reasonable to them. And then the back and forth starts. The seller then has the opportunity to accept your terms, or they can write what's called a counter offer and make a new offer to you essentially to do a little bit of back and forth. So maybe you make an offer with a low price and terms that are super favorable to you, and the seller might come back and say, well, I'll accept your terms, but I want to have a little bit higher price. Or maybe the opposite. I won't accept your terms, but I will lower the price. I want these terms. So the counteroffer is a new offer from the seller to you as the buyer. This can go on multiple times. So I had one more recently where we did have this back and forth, and I believe there were 2 different offers from each side until one from the seller, and then we made a new offer. So there were 3 total offers, one from the buyer, a counteroffer from the seller, and then another offer from the buyer. And then we were able to come to an agreement. We changed some of the terms initially that we made, and then they dropped their price, but we came up a little bit on the price from where we had initially offered. And what we're going for in this offer negotiation process is what's called mutual acceptance. Now, there are opportunities after mutual acceptance to renegotiate a little bit, and the main areas there are going to be the inspection period. So if there are issues with the inspection or things that you would like the seller to fix, then that would be an opportunity to negotiate then. If the appraisal comes in low from the bank on the purchase price and it's below the purchase price, there's also opportunities to negotiate there. But generally speaking, most of the negotiation in the real estate transaction happens right there when you're working for mutual acceptance. And we'll talk a little bit more about counteroffers and how those work in the next video.